All right, no belching at the beginning of the show this week. I don't know how that worked. I don't know how. There's something with the way YouTube is set up. You know, if you listen to the audio podcast, the audio recording of this, it's the YouTube video, and then we kind of like rip the audio. They call it ripping in the industry. You just pull the audio from it and create a podcast out of it. And there's something with the way YouTube gets the information from the streaming software that I use to set up this whole thing. Somehow YouTube gets, it's like a delay, and then it records it. I don't really understand it. But somehow it ended up that on last week's video, last week's live show, and last week's, consequently last week's podcast, I let out a big belch at the beginning, and I didn't even say excuse me. How rude. But I didn't think I was actually on live video yet. I didn't think that it would record. I thought I belched, apparently, and then hit the go live button. But apparently I don't think I messed up the timing on that, honestly. It's something weird with the way YouTube gets the information from the streaming software. So I apologize for everyone who was offended by my unsightly bodily sounds prior to the start of last week's live show. I got one or two comments about it. I was like, "What are people talking about? Belching at the beginning? What do you mean?" And then I went and listened to it on Spotify or Apple. I forget where I pulled up the podcast and just pushed play, and it was I was shocked when I heard it. It was abrupt, and it happened out of nowhere, and so I apologize for anyone who was caught off guard by that. But I mean, you probably found it a little bit funny. If I was listening to a podcast I pushed play, and the first thing I heard was a big belch, and then about 30 seconds later it said, "Okay, it's 8:30 on a Wednesday night," I would probably crack up pretty good, and hopefully you got a good laugh out of that. I feel like probably do listen to podcasts where people belch all the time, but it's not typically what we do here on the Panther-Lair Show. You know what we do here on the Panther-Lair Show. We talk about Pitt sports, right? Football, basketball, recruiting, everything going on in the world of Pitt sports. We talk about it all right here every Wednesday night on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We get together at 8:30 and just sit down and start chatting about whatever's going on in the world of Pitt sports. Primarily football, basketball, and recruiting, but anything else that's noteworthy. And of course, you can have input on what we discuss with the chat screen right there along the right-hand side of your screen. You can put your comments and your questions there, and we'll interact. We'll discuss. I'll read your comment, react to your comment, respond to your question, and we can have almost sort of a conversation, a back and forth. And then you guys sometimes get a little wild in the chat and have your own little conversations and back and forth. And I realize that I'm doing my thing and you're doing yours, and it just so happens we're on the same platform, even if we're not really interacting. But it's a fun thing we do every week. I enjoy it, and I appreciate everybody who tunes in and joins the live stream as we do it on a Wednesday night. If you listen to this podcast during the week, or you watch the video later on the week, or whenever it is, and you say, "Oh, I had something I wanted to say," or "That was a stupid comment," or "Chris, what are you thinking about that? You're an idiot." Well, this is your opportunity to go and say those things. You can join the conversation. It's what I always say every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So what we always ask you to do is like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I imagine a lot of people who would like to participate in the live show don't do it because they forget. Well, one way to make sure you don't forget, subscribe to the YouTube channel at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and you can turn on notifications. And when you turn those on, you'll get an alert sent to your phone every time we go live. And so you'll be sitting there and it says, so Panther-Lair is now broadcasting live. And you're like, "Oh yeah, that's right. I wanted to get on that show and tell Peek he's a moron." Well, that's your opportunity to do it, and we'll even help you out by sending you a notification about it. So make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and turn on those notifications. And then, of course, like this video too. And then after all of that, or before, or whenever you choose to do it, just do it. Go visit Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It is the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, and recruiting, we cover it all at Panther-Lair.com, and of course message boards where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans all day, every day. And I say that all day, every day. It sounds like a hyperbole or some silly false advertising, but it's not. It's reality. There are people on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com all day, every day, talking about Pitt sports. and it's pretty great. It's a lot of fun. We have a good time there. Just kind of getting into it. Whatever's going on, people are talking about it on the message boards, and you really can look. I always sort of say this, that before I go to bed, one of the last things I do is I check the boards, just see what people are saying, see if any new replies or posts or comments or whatever it is. And then in the morning, pretty early in the morning, I'm taking a look again, see what people posted overnight, new threads, new comments, new responses, new replies. There's always some conversation happening on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. So you're looking for people of your kind, people of your ilk, other Pitt fans, diehard Pitt fans. This is the place to find it. It's the best online community of Pitt sports fans. Panther-Lair.com. Pittsburgh.rivals.com. And of course, there's plenty to talk about this week. The message boards have been buzzing for sure. There was the blue gold game over the weekend. We got the slideshow running right there. You can check out photos. There's Ben Sauls putting up a field goal kick. There was the blue gold game on Saturday, and then some transfer news. Pitt basketball got a transfer last week. They got a transfer this week. Jeff Cable is now 2 for 2 on hosting official visitors, transfers as official visitors, and getting them to commit after the visit. And so there's been a lot to talk about. And then other transfer targets have gone off the board. Pitt lost a transfer wide receiver. We'll talk about that as well. And yeah, we'll cover all those topics. So whatever you want to talk about, get in the chat screen and start having that conversation now. And I actually want to start with something we've been talking about. That's something... the Morning Pit today, because we do that every day. I didn't mention the Morning Pit. Morning Pit we do every day. Just a video we put out every morning just to talk about whatever's going on in the world of Pitt sports. And the one that we released today... was sort of a reaction to the news that Miles Alston is transferring from Pitt. Alston's a redshirt sophomore wide receiver. Hasn't really played much. Never caught a pass. Only had one target over the course of his career. That was in the Carolina game last year. He did not catch it. All told, last season he played 31 snaps according to Pro Football Focus and ran a passing route on 15 of them. So 16 of his career 31 snaps, he was run blocking. Alston decided after the conclusion of spring camp that he presumably doesn't see the best path or best opportunity here, and he's going to go look for an opportunity somewhere else. I think he tweeted that he got an offer from Old Dominion. Sounds about right. I think there's probably a good opportunity for him there. Nice kid, nice player. Didn't seem to really be in the mix here at wide receiver. And so, not a huge blow to the wide receiver room to lose Miles Alston, but it did, that news sort of set us up for a conversation about state of Pitt's receiver room, which is not good. And this is a comment, one of the first comments here that we have is Josh Newark saying, Peak, you had me fired up about the prospects of a great upcoming season. Then you rained on our parade by talking about how scary our wide receiver room is this year on the Morning Pit. Scale of 1 to 10, how concerned should we be about the receivers? I'll be honest with you, and we might as well just start the conversation right here. I see that as the weakest position on the team. Now, that's an extraordinarily negative thing to say, but it's sort of the reality. And any team is going to have its weakest position. Somebody has to be at the bottom, right? Somebody has to be last. And I think it just so happens to be the wide receivers. Maybe punter, I guess you could probably talk about, although Caleb Junko and Jeff Yerk, I think are decent options. They're just not the options we expected Pitt to really be working with coming into this season. But I think the wide receiver position, when you talk offense and defense, is probably the weakest position on the team. Tight end probably has a case to be made, although Carter Johnson was the most improved player of spring on offense. And Gavin Bartholomew obviously has had success in his career. I thought even Jake Renda looked okay in the blue gold game, showed a little athleticism. Doesn't seem to have filled out, and he doesn't seem as thick as you would like him to be. Or as big as you would like a tight end to be, but I digress. I think the wide receiver room is a problem, and I think it's a problem for a number of reasons. But there are a lot of sort of quick observations you can make about the receivers, and each one has a pretty negative vibe to it. You could say that they came into spring and their top 3 receivers are all guys who transferred here, all guys who didn't start their careers at Pitt. And yes, it's 2023. There are transfers all over the place. Teams rely on transfers all the time, and they should. Everybody needs transfers. Everybody that's normal. But it's not normal to have basically the entire top of your depth chart filled with transfers at a position where you play more than one player. The top of the depth chart at quarterback is filled with transfers because you play one guy. And then, so if the number one guy is a transfer, then the top of your depth chart is filled with transfers. But at a position like wide receiver, where you're going to, you have a top three, right? You have three guys who are kind of your top line receivers, and all three of them are transfers. Two of them came in last year, and one came in this year. That's not good. That doesn't speak well of your recruiting. It doesn't speak well of the state of your position room, and it doesn't speak well of how that group is being developed. You add in the fact that out of, what do they have? They came into spring with 9 scholarship receivers, I think. Two caught a pass for Pitt last season. I mean, that's it. 2 out of 9. Guys, 9 scholarship receivers coming in to spring, and 2 of them caught a pass for Pitt last season. Dejon Reynolds was at Florida. Javonte Royal was at defensive back. Miles Alston played 30 snaps and saw 1 target. Addison Copeland and Che Wabuko redshirted. They didn't play at all. Lamar Seymour and Izzy Polk were in high school. 9 guys, and not one of them, only 2 of them, I should say, did anything for Pitt last season. So, I mean, that's a trying to think of the right adjective. I don't want to just say bad, although it is a bad situation. I don't want to say scary, although it is a scary situation. I don't want to say dangerous, although it is a dangerous situation. It's not ideal. Let's put it that way. It's not an ideal situation to have at a position that's pretty important. I mean, the biggest key for this team in 2023 is getting a better passing game than they had last year. Getting more of a threat from the passing game than they had last year. Actually being able to attack teams vertically consistently, which they were unable to do last year. And a big part of that's the quarterback. Got to get the quarterback play better. Have to upgrade the quarterback position. Coaches seem to feel like they did. We'll find out if they're right. But you need guys who can catch those balls too. You need the guys who can make those plays downfield as well. And while I mean, maybe even more than others, I'm bullish on Konate Mumfield. I think Bub Means has a chance to be really, really explosive and good. I keep saying this over and over. I think his physical traits, are great. He's got great size. He's fast. He can jump. He's just got to actually play receiver. He's got to actually be a wide receiver, which is why I made such a big deal on Monday, I think it was, when we talked about the offense from the blue gold game, about that jumping catch that Means made that Djokovic threw kind of into traffic, but kind of put it where if Means jumped and made the athletic play, he could make a pretty good catch. Means made the athletic play. If he can do that with consistency this season, that's going to be huge. And I think Dejon Reynolds can have a role. I think he can be a certain type of receiver, as a big body kind of guy. I like all 3 of those guys. But it's only 3 guys. And if one of them gets hurt or 2 of them get hurt, as was the case in the blue gold game on Saturday, where Reynolds and Mumfield didn't play, you now have Means, and I think the other starting wide receiver for the first team offense was Miles Alston, who ended up transferring. Alston played 31 snaps last year, run blocked on 16 of them, had 1 pass thrown to him and didn't catch it. And then your second team, you are into the walk-ons and the redshirt freshmen and the true freshmen and the guys who haven't played at all. That's a dicey situation, and it took 2 guys being out to get to it. Now, yeah, any position, you lose 2 guys to injury, your depth is going to take a hit. You're going to be digging down the depth chart to players you don't necessarily want to have out there. I get that. That's normal. I just think the drop-off is so severe from Pitt's top line to the rest of them. And I have a couple thoughts on the fact of how severe it is. But the fact that it's so severe, I think, makes it sting even more and make it an even more precarious situation. And just to sort of add on top of that, we talk about the drop-off being considerable from Means, Mumfield, and Reynolds to the guys behind them. That's a huge drop-off. And we're not talking about a top three that's Larry Fitzgerald, Tyler Boyd, and Jordan Addison. We're talking about Konate Mumfield and Bub Means and Dejon Reynolds. Good players who I think can be pretty good. But the fact that the drop-off is as severe as it is, and it's only starting at a certain level anyway, it's a dicey situation. And to some, I think they're going to go out and try and get another, one or two receivers out of the transfer portal. We know they've been working on some. They just offered another one today, kid from Eastern Michigan. And so obviously the coaches recognize it as well. And they're trying to bring in, some support, bring in some extra guys who can work in this room and help and contribute and play. But to some extent, you're also just going to kind of have to eat it and play some of the freshmen. I mean, I think guys like, and you can take your pick from the four freshmen, Lamar Seymour or Izzy Polk or Kenny Johnson or Zion Fowler, any 1 to 3 or 4 of them are going to need to be on the field this year. And you just have to hope you can get guys who are ready to really contribute and have a big season. That's not easy to do. It's not easy to do when you're talking about true freshmen. And at least 2 of them were here for spring camp, so that helps and helps with their understanding of the offense and knowledge and all of those things. But if Kenny Johnson's a better option, he needs to play. If Lamar Seymour is a better option, he needs to play. Whoever it is, Fowler, Polk, whoever. They need to find something. And so, to Josh, to your question, what's the level of concern 1 to 10? I mean, I wouldn't put it all the way at 1. I'm assuming 1 is the lowest. I'm not putting it all the way at 1 because I do think Mumfield and Means can be pretty good, and I think Reynolds has a chance to be good. So I'm going higher than that, but the depth and the lack of depth and the fact that you've got basically 3 recruiting classes from 2019, 20, and 21, and there's one guy from those 3 recruiting classes on the roster receiver right now, and that one guy is a guy who was playing defensive back last year. That has created some massive holes on this roster at wide receiver, and they're gonna have to find a way to fill them. They're gonna have to, transfer portal. You're gonna have to bring him in, and then you're gonna have to start trying to rebuild the foundation of the room, which I think is part of why they took 4 receivers in this 2023 recruiting class, and I wouldn't be surprised if they try and get bigger numbers again in this 2024 recruiting class. They should. We'll see what they're able to pull off. Day Farmer's a good start, 4-star kid from Florida. Need a few more of those. A few. Let's see here what all we're talking about. We got a lot of comments and questions in the chat already. Let's see. Trying to think if I have a few other things I wanted to talk about before we jump into the chat. I know we have. Well, here we'll get to the super chatter. RJC Man 38 is our regular super chatter, and we appreciate him. He says Means is going to be better this season. Well, I think so. I think he should be. I think he's got a chance. I thought he made some good plays in the blue gold game. And again, all the physical skills are there, but when you watched him last year, he looked very unrefined as a wide receiver. So, he could be a great athlete, but he's going to have to add something else on top of that. He's going to have to add some details, route running, pass catching, being a reliable receiver. He's got to make big strides there. All right. Oh, let me tell you about Chris Gates real quick. Before we get back to the comments and questions. Chris Gates, you guys know him. The Wednesday live show, it's sponsored as always by Chris Gates Fitness. Chris, if you don't know him, other than having a great name, Chris is an online fitness coach from Pittsburgh, and he works with people all over the world to create customized fitness and nutrition programs that work. He's also a huge Pitt fan, and he loves supporting the Wednesday live show every week. We love him for that. Now, Chris recently published a brand new article on how to stay motivated to eat healthy and exercise, which you should definitely check out. He gives 13 strategies that you can use to not only get started, but remain consistent. We're in between New Year's resolution season and getting in shape for the summer season. And so it's a tough time to stay motivated. So if you're struggling, there's probably something in there that will help. So go to chrisgatesfitness.com, Chris, C-H-R-I-S, Gates, Gates, fitness.com. Click on articles to read more. Or you can find it on the Panther-Lair message board, because Chris actually posted the link there, and there's a pretty good thread of conversation with other Pitt fans. So look for it. It's about how to stay motivated to eat healthy and exercise. Great stuff from Chris as always, and great stuff from Chris for supporting the podcast. We appreciate him, so you should definitely go check him out. ChrisGatesFitness.com. Thanks to Chris, as always. Let's see. Comments and questions here. Dennis Hurl says, over the past 2 seasons, the only Power 5 team to win more games than Pitt, the only Power 5 teams to win more games than Pitt are Georgia, Michigan, Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson. That's elite company, even if the FPI doesn't view the Panthers as an elite team. Read this on ESPN just a few minutes ago. So the FPI thing, football percentage index, I guess it is. Is that what it is? Let me bring that up. So there's a conversation about this because it came out, today, I guess. They released their FPI rankings. Let's see where Pitt ended up. They were not in the top 25 in the Football Power Index. Somebody said they were like 35. Let's see if I can find real quick. You know what? Doesn't matter. Here's a couple things. All right. The computers aren't going to like Pitt. Okay? They aren't going to like Pitt, particularly prior to the season. Computer algorithms and computer calculations and things like that, where you're inputting data from last season, they're not going to like Pitt. Even if they didn't like Pitt last year, they're not going to like Pitt now. Okay? Because you look at what's gone. All right? You lost a 1,000-yard receiver. You lost a 1,600-yard rusher who led the country in rushing touchdowns. And like him or not, you lost a starting quarterback. So you've lost a ton of the production at those 3 positions: a receiver, quarterback, and running back. Then you've got 6 starters gone from the defense, hugely productive players. I mean, you're talking Kalijah Cansey. You're talking Servassier Dennis. You're talking Brandon Hill and Eric Hallett and Haba Baldonado and Deslin Alexander. You've got 6 starters leaving with a ton of production. So when the computer models are looking at a team like Pitt, they're looking at all that production gone on defense and all that production gone on offense, and they're saying, we don't think you're going to be very good. Or at least as it stands right now, we don't think you're going to be very good. Now, you and I think Rodney Hammond's really good, right? You and I think this linebacker core with Shane Simon in the middle and Bengali Kamara and Solomon Shields on the outside will be pretty good. You and I think Sean Fitzsimmons is going to be a stud. You and I think Javon McIntyre and Donovan McMillan and Stephon Hall and Philip P.J. O'Brien can be good. You and I think all of those things. You and I might even think Phil Dracovic is going to be good. You and I might think Bub Means is going to take a step forward. The computer doesn't give a damn what we guess is going to happen. Computers aren't going to factor that in. A computer's not going to sit there. A computer is going to say Sean Fitz who? A computer is going to sit there and say Stephon who? A computer is going to say, is it PJ or Philip? Is it PJ or Philip? I'm confused. I don't know. Does not compute. Beep, beep, danger, danger. This is how computers talk. I don't know. Like, given that I work, with Rivals.com, Panther-Lair.com, the website, I'm kind of in tune with computers. A lot of 001 over here. And so this is how computers talk. And they have no concept of who Nakai Johnson is. Now, I'm not saying all these guys are going to be studs. I'm not saying all these guys are going to replace the production that's gone. And actually, as I'm sitting here talking about it, I'm a little concerned about the middle linebacker position. I think Shane Simon's a really good player, but I think Servassier Dennis was pretty special. I think it's going to take time for the safeties to get up to speed. I don't know if Phil Drakovic's going to be good. I don't know if Bub Means is going to take a step forward. I don't know if this running back group has a breakaway threat, a home run hitter that can, sort of equal some of the run game explosiveness that they had in Izzy Abanikanda last year. I don't know. I have guesses on these things. I have thoughts on these things. I have ideas, but I don't know. And the computers aren't going to know either. None of us are, really is going to know until it actually happens or doesn't. And so when you look at something like FPI or any other, the S&P Plus or these things or that thing, I'm guessing none of them will look very favorably on Pitt because there's so many questions about how they're going to replace all that they lost. Production on both sides of the ball. Doesn't matter that they brought back all those offensive linemen. Doesn't matter that their corners are back. Doesn't matter that, all those veteran defensive tackles came back, or Bengali Kamara. Like those things don't really move the needle much in terms of computer rankings. And so you're not going to get, if you're looking for affirmation from the computer models right now, you're probably not going to get it. So that's kind of my thought on that. I do think Pitt's accomplishment, what did we see the other day? The only team that's won more ACC games since expansion than Clemson, or the only team that's won more ACC games since expansion than Pitt is Clemson, or something like that. I mean, Pitt has been pretty good. They've accomplished quite a bit. I think we miss it sometimes because we think about the things that they failed to accomplish. We think about Western Michigan and Georgia Tech. We think about 2018, all the missed opportunities there to that ended up overshadowing a Coastal Division championship. We miss for some of those because of some of those situations. But on the whole, I think Pitt has been a pretty good program, a pretty reliable program, and they have an opportunity to carry it forward this year. But they're going to do it with new players. If they're able to do it this year, they're going to do it with new players. Now, if they are able to do it this year, that's going to bode really well for the future because they're going to be breaking in a lot of guys who will be here for the future. Maybe not necessarily at middle linebacker. I think Shane Simon is kind of getting on in years. They'll have to replace the linebackers next year, I would think. At least a couple of them. But they should be better positioned. You should be able to have a little more preseason or offseason confidence next year than you do right now. But there's a lot of question marks. There's a lot that's up in the air. And, and we sit back, and I've said this a lot of times. I've said this enough times that if you've listened to these podcasts enough, you probably have absorbed this just through osmosis. I think we have a certain level of blind faith in the coaching staff when it comes to defense, particularly the defensive line and the defensive backs. That I think that's where strengths have been in recruiting, and I think that's where there are definitely strengths in coaching with Charlie Partridge and Archie Collins and Corey Sanders. I think we sort of just assume that those positions, despite all the turnover they have, where they're replacing 5 starters out of 8 positions between the defensive line and the secondary. Even though they're replacing 5 starters out of 8 positions, I think we have a fair amount of confidence that they'll be able to do it just fine. Which is weird. Blind faith is not always the best way to operate, but I think we kind of expect it at this point. Because they've proven it. Are you betting against Charlie Partridge at this point? But there again, I don't know that the computers account for that. I don't know that the computers are saying, oh, okay, yeah, they lost Kalijah Cansey and Hobble Baldonado, but they have Charlie Partridge, so they'll be okay. I think this is going to be more of a prove-it year because I don't think quite as much is going to be expected out of Pitt. And I'll tell you this, all right, before we get it back into the comments and questions. If they go to, where are they, the ACC preseason meetings, Charlotte or wherever the hell somewhere. If they go down there and the media gives Pitt some love, they end up getting voted into the top 4 or top 3 of the conference preseason. And I'm not sure that they will. But if they do, that, lost amid your, cries of disrespect, you got to actually say, you know what, that speaks to the perception of the Pitt program. It's actually a show of respect. If Pitt gets voted into the top 5 in the conference preseason poll, it's going to be almost exclusively on the strength of what the media believes Pat Narduzzi has built at Pitt. Because of all those open spots that they're trying to fill, it's not like you're betting on the returning production because there isn't much of it. So that'll actually be a real show of respect if Pitt ends up getting voted in the top 5, top 4, top 3 or something of the ACC preseason because of how much they've lost. It'll be a respect for the program as a whole. So that'll be interesting. Remind me that I said that when we get to August or whenever they have those meetings, July, remind me that I said it's a show of respect if they're voted to finish 4th in the ACC or 5th or whatever it is. Because remember, it's one division now. It's not the Coastal and the Atlantic anymore. So I'm not saying they get voted 4th or 5th in the Coastal. I'm saying 4th or 5th out of the entire conference. All right, let's get back to comments and questions. See what people are saying here. Matthew Spear says, I saw Pitt offered a new receiver today in the portal from Eastern Michigan. Any traction there? Any other potential new names the coaches are looking at in the portal? Yeah, they offered, let me bring up his name. Darius Lassiter from Eastern Michigan. Productive guy, kind of came on late at the end of the season, did well for Eastern Michigan after playing at JUCO for a couple of years. He just went into the portal somewhat recently. The 17th. He announced 2 days ago that he was going in, and since then he's gotten offers. It started off with Toledo, then Texas State, then James Madison, then UNLV. I'm just going through his Twitter right here. East Carolina, Middle Tennessee, and then Boston College, Pitt, Tulsa, BYU, and UConn. So he's been pretty much blowing up over the last 2 days. We're still trying to find out a little bit more about what's going on there, about Pitt's chances and kind of where Pitt stands. But you know, they can offer playing time. You know what I mean? It's going to be Taekwon Underwood trying to work his magic. You know, he's going to be the point of contact here, and he's going to have to sell it. And Frank Signetti's going to have to sell it that you can come in here and there's an opportunity to play and play at the Power 5 level. Right now, you know, I just read off that list. I mean, pretty much Pitt and Boston College, 2 ACC programs. Stand out. I don't think we count BYU as Power 5, do we? They're like independent now, right? Is UConn's independent too, right? We definitely don't count them as Power 5. Let's just say the actual 5 conferences is Pitt and Boston College as far as Power 5 options for Darius Lassiter. Other guys, I'm not sure who else they might be looking at. It's just going to be a matter of kind of waiting and seeing what comes out and who they move on. Things tend to happen fast and happen in bunches at this time of year, and I think that'll probably be the case with Pitt's efforts trying to get a receiver out of the portal. Jim Hicks says, where's your comment go, Jim? Redshirt freshman Che Wabuko is one of the fastest 60-meter guys in the ACC. Yeah, he's fast. He's super fast. There's no question about that. Che Wabuko is speed, and explosive. I don't know if he's explosive power or not, but he's speed. He's remarkably fast. Does that translate to playing football? So far it doesn't really seem like it has. Now, I think this was a question when Che Wabuko was coming in here. You know, he's got all this speed. Can he do it on the football field? Can he be a football player who's really fast and not just a track star who happens to be on the field? I haven't really gotten any indication that he's getting himself into the mix. You know, we haven't really seen much of that from spring camp, and nothing that we've really heard indicates that he's putting himself in the mix. But he's got all that speed. I mean, I know fans like to say, like, coaches got to find a way to get him to use that speed, but I think they want to avoid having someone who's a one-trick pony. Now, sometimes if your one trick is really, really good, you can get away with it, but I don't know if that's necessarily the case with Che Wabuko. He's super fast. There's no question. Maybe kick returns. You know, I've often said this, that if it was me, I would always put my fastest guy on kick return. That would be the thing that would matter the most to me. I would spend most of my time on the other 10 guys on the field trying to set up the return, right? Trying to get the blocking scheme right, trying to get that all set up so that, and then have my fastest guy so that if we execute the blocking scheme, if we block it the way I want it to be blocked, and my returner follows it, he's going to be gone. You know, I would want the fastest guy on my team to be the kick returner, so that if we execute the blocks, I have somebody who can take it to the house. I don't understand this fascination with putting running backs on the kick return team. Now, Izzy Abanikanda was really, really fast. I mean, he probably qualified as the fastest guy on the team, and if not the fastest, he was one of the fastest guys on the team. And so I kind of understand that, but I would take my fastest guy and put him back there. And if that's Che Wabuko, if I can trust him to catch the ball and follow the blocks, then I'm doing that. And then I'm spending all my time trying to set up a good blocking scheme and executing it. But that's just me. I've said that for a long time. I'm far more interested in just flat out straight line speed from my kick returner because I want to set up a block where he just has to run in a straight line. But that's just me. Let's see. RJC Man 38 says, I'm worried more about Frank Flintstone repeating the Georgia Tech Louisville performances. Please tell us how he's going to improve. I don't know. I mean, Georgia Tech Louisville, he did well, I thought, at Miami. I know Miami felt like they sort of had quit, but thought he called a good game. I thought he called a good... I'd have to go back and look at it, but I sort of seem to feel like the Duke game was a well-called game. The UCLA game was a well-called game. I mean, the Georgia Tech game was a disaster on a lot of levels. I think the quarterback play was a big problem. And I mean, like, the Louisville game, like, why did Frank Cignetti call 2 red zone interceptions and a red zone fumble? That's bad coaching. Now, you want to make a case that he should have pulled the quarterback. I mean, maybe there's something to be said for that. But they decided to stick with the guy they felt gave him the best chance to win. Obviously, he didn't, or maybe he did give them the best chance to win, and they just didn't win. Maybe he still was the best option regardless of what the outcome was. I don't know. I think Cignetti has things he can do better this year. I think on a lot of levels between the quarterback and also some of the personnel. This is an important year for him too. He hitched his wagon to Phil Dracovic, and now he's got to go out and win with Phil Dracovic. And I think it's an important year for Cignetti. I think it's an important year for a lot of guys, but I think Frank Cignetti needs a much better offense than he got last year. I don't know, job, hot seat, anything like that. I know Mark Whipple's the only offensive coordinator who's made it more than 2 years with Pat Narduzzi, and he did so, largely because his return was tied to Kenny Pickett's return, or maybe it was the other way around. Kenny Pickett's return was tied to his return. So, I think if you're Frank Cignetti, you needed to go and take a long, hard look at what you did and what you didn't do in 2022, what worked and what didn't work, and your role in all of it. Your role in what worked and your role in what didn't work. Because you can't blame it all on the quarterback. And Cignetti, has not done that. Now, he hasn't done interviews where he's saying it was all the quarterback's fault. Pat Narduzzi's done those, or at least gotten close enough to it. Cignetti has not blamed it all on the quarterback, but that seems to be the running implication around Pitt, right? We see it all the time. From what people are saying, players, coaches, there seems to be just sort of an assumption that it was all Keaton Slovis's fault, and it's easy to kick dirt on him because he's gone. Well, he is gone. So now you got rid of that problem. What you're sort of suggesting was the big issue with the offense last year. Now you need to be good. Like you got rid of that problem. You brought in your hand-picked quarterback, the guy you really wanted, and you've been talking about all the things he does better than the last guy did. Well, you better have a good offense. You better go win games. Let's see. William Schroeder says, my gut says Pitt is going to have a good team, but I'm worried about their schedule. Yeah, the schedule is certainly unforgiving. I guess, there's some gauntlet stretches in this schedule. When you start off, you get Wofford, but then you go Cincinnati, West Virginia, North Carolina. That's and Virginia Tech, Louisville. You are just up to the Virginia Tech game. That's, 4 out of your first 5 games. Well, 4 out of the first 5 weeks, you're playing Power 5 opponents. That's a challenge. You have Notre Dame on the schedule. That's a challenge. You have Notre Dame and Florida State in back-to-back weeks. That's not going to be easy. But you still have I mean, I know I mentioned about Power 5 opponents, but I mean, West Virginia should be a game you can win down there. Virginia Tech, Louisville is not a game you should lose. I don't know that Wake Forest is a game you should lose. Syracuse, Boston College, Duke. I mean, how many did I just list there? Duke, Boston College, Syracuse. Well, I'll come back to Duke in a second. But Duke, Boston College, Syracuse, Wake, Louisville, Georgia, or Virginia Tech, and West Virginia. Those 7 should be wins, I would think. I know Duke is getting better, but even as Duke was improving and Pitt struggled, Pitt still managed to win that game. I think those 7 should be wins. Those are ACC games. Add in Wofford, that's 8, right? So we're really talking about the Cincinnati, Carolina, Notre Dame, and Florida State games that are the biggest question marks. Now, I realize we're operating on the assumption you don't blow it against any of those other 8 teams, right? All those eight games that I said should be wins. Georgia Tech and Louisville would have been in that category last year, and they obviously blew those games, and that loomed large in how that season went. So we're operating on this little exercise I'm in the middle of is operating on the assumption you don't blow it against those 8 teams, and you take care of business in those 8 games, and then your season really is determined by, Cincinnati, Carolina, Florida State, Notre Dame. I can't say I have a great feel for any of those. You get Carolina here, right? I think that game is here. They were down there last year. Just want to make sure. Yeah, that game is here. Cincinnati is here. Florida State is here. And then Notre Dame on the road. It's oft repeated, and it's a cliche that, well, they always play Notre Dame tough. And it's true. They do always play Notre Dame. They often play Notre Dame tough. They don't often win, but they often play them tough. Even in 2018, you remember that game was a pretty close game. They almost beat them out there. I think they can give Notre Dame a battle, particularly if Sam Hartman's quarterback. I guess there's a quarterback battle out there, right? It's not guaranteed that Sam Hartman will be their starter. So we'll see what happens with that. Florida State, I'm sort of buying in on Florida State, but I think by the time Pitt plays Florida State, that game's late in the season. That's game number 9 on November 4th. Starting the final month of the season. By the time they play that game, I think we'll know if Florida State's for real or not. It certainly feels like Florida State's going to be for real. It certainly feels like this is a turning point for them, and this is going to be their real breakout season with Mike Norvell. If last year wasn't, then this year will be. But we'll see where they're at after October. I think they seem poised to have that big season, but they need to actually do it before I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. And by the time we get to October, they could be 5-3 or something like that. I don't even know what Florida State's schedule looks like heading into the Pitt game. Where's their schedule? I'm just looking up Florida State's schedule real quick. In the first 8 games heading into the Pitt game, they have LSU, and then Southern Miss, Boston College, Clemson. So they get Clemson in September. They have Virginia Tech, Syracuse, Duke, and Wake Forest. So, I mean, LSU and Clemson, I guess. So they realistically could be 6-2. Now, I guess that would actually be sort of a barometer. If Florida State comes into that game with a worse record than 6-2, I think 6-2 is sort of the minimum acceptable record for that at those first 8 games for Florida State. Although Florida State realistically has these sort of playoff aspirations that they're telling everyone they have, then they have to do better than 6-2. They have to beat LSU and or beat Clemson. If they come into that game at 6-2, I'll say, okay, they're a formidable threat. They're taking care of business other than those 2 big games. If they come in at 5-3 or 4-4, I'm going to say, well, they looks like not this year. And that game maybe looks a little bit more winnable. So the schedule, I think. There are tough games on the schedule, but there's also a huge chunk of it, 67% of it or whatever, 2/3 of the schedule, I would say, are games you should win. And if the program's in the position that we think it's in, if it's in the state that we think it's in, then you should win those 8 games and then have your season decided, as far as what level of success you're actually going to attain or achieve, based on Cincinnati, Carolina, Notre Dame, and Florida State. So, we'll see. We'll see what the schedule the schedule brings. Oh, I do have to tell you, we got a lot more comments and questions I'm going to get to here. We got another super chatter who came in. Let me get to him. Daniel Kulikowski says, odds on landing Jaquay Jackson. Daniel, thanks for being a super chatter for the first time, by the way. Good to, we appreciate that. Glad you joined us. Jaquay Jackson, not really sure. The transfer wide receiver from Cal U. He's originally a Pittsburgh guy. I think he went to Sarah Catholic or someplace like that. It seemed like Pitt might have a really good chance to bring him home. And then he just blew up. I mean, just blew up with offers. Blew up with scholarships from schools all over the country. And it's gotten a lot more challenging. They had him on campus 2 weeks ago, I think, for a visit. But he's been visiting other schools too. And I really don't have a sense. And I'm not sure if anybody really has a sense of where he's leaning. I wouldn't be surprised if it was like Miami or someplace. Not sure how involved Penn State is, but that obviously is something to watch out for. They got Dante Cephas, the Kent State receiver who was from Penn Hills. I don't know if they would. I don't know if they're pushing for Jackson as well, but I don't have a good feel for the odds there, Daniel. So I apologize. I appreciate you being a super chatter, but I can't totally answer your question yet. What I can tell you about though is the Draft 412 party next Thursday night. It's next Thursday, April 27th. It's Stage AE with the Jerome Bettis Bus Stops Here Foundation. Draft 412 is hosting a draft party at Stage AE. How awesome is that? It's going to be so much fun. I'm going to be down there. Travis Marzina of 105.9 The X and X-Steeler great Merrill Hodge is going to be there to provide live commentary. Part of the proceeds actually are going to benefit the Jerome Bettis Bus Stops Here Foundation. There's all kinds of sponsors already on board: iHeartRadio, Caliente Pizza, Fanatics, Bet Rivers, Permanis, Condado Tacos, Burgatory Shorties, Three Rivers Karting, Eaton Park, many more. I'm going to be there to talk about Pitt guys and kind of react to their prospects for being drafted. We'll see when Kalijah Cansey goes. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be at Stage AE. So go, let me find I should have their website, draft412.com. Go to draft412.com. You can get tickets to go and hang out with a couple hundred other crazy football fans watching the first round of the draft next Thursday night, April 27th at Stage AE in the North Shore. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it. I hope you can make it. Go check it out. Draft412.com is the website to look for. That is going to be a lot of fun. I hope you guys can come out for that. All right, let's scroll down here. See some other questions we have in our final 10 minutes or so. RJC Man 38 says schedule is all on Heather Lyke. 11 Power 5 games. How can a team stay healthy? Well, yeah, all on Heather Lyke. 11 Power 5 games. Well, you got 8 that are ACC games, right? So that's not on Heather Lyke. You got Cincinnati, who is moving into the Big 12 this year. So when that series was scheduled, it wasn't a Power 5 game. You've got Notre Dame, who the ACC puts that on your schedule. You don't choose that yourself, so that's not on Heather Lyke either. You do have West Virginia. I think Heather Lyke did that series, I think. I always forget if it was Heather Lyke or Scott Barnes, but we'll give it to Heather Lyke, and that's one. And are you going to turn that down? Are you going to turn down a Pitt West Virginia series? So out of the 11 Power 5 games, she was responsible for 1. I know we're always anxious to put it on Heather Lyke and put the blame on her and say this is her fault. That's her fault, but the reality is it's not her fault. Let's see. Daniel Kulikowski says, "What assistant coach is on the hottest seat this year?" I'm not sure. I don't know of any. I don't know. I mean, I think. I can't really think of an assistant coach who would be on a hot seat. I mean, the offense has to get better. So, I mean, you could say Frank Signetti, but I don't know how hot the seat is necessarily. But he obviously needs to show improvement. Special teams, they need the punting game to get better. So maybe you could say Andre Powell, but they had a really good field goal kicker last year. And they had a running back who was one of the best players in the country last year. So not really sure you would say him. You could point out the tight end issues and say maybe Tim Salem, but Salem is a really good recruiter for Pitt, and I think and he's been with Narduzzi since the very beginning, and I'm not sure if he's really on any kind of hot seat. I don't see any hot seats for the football assistant coaches. I really don't. I mean, I could be wrong. I don't know what Pat Narduzzi's thinking, but I don't see it. RJC Man 38 says, will Frank Cignetti be quicker to pull Phil Dracovic if he struggles? I don't know. I don't know what the leash is. I don't know how quick that hook is. I think each situation is different. I think, for Frank Cignetti sitting back looking at Keaton Slovis versus Nick Patty versus Nate Yarnell is going to be different than Frank Cignetti sitting back and looking at Phil Dracovic versus Christian Bear versus Nate Yarnell. I think each of those guys is different. I think how they know the offense is different. How they practice is different. What they bring is different. And he knows Phil Dracovic well. He knows his mindset. He knows his mentality and his makeup. And I think he should be pretty well, think of the right word here. He should have a solid base of knowledge in knowing when he might need to pull Dracovic. By that I mean I think he should know Dracovic well enough that he knows, okay, this isn't going to work. That if he's in the game and he sees Dracovic making decisions that Dracovic would not typically make, if he sees Dracovic making mistakes that he would not typically make, he's going, I think he's in a unique position because of all of his background and, history with Dracovic to sort of know if it's time to do it or not. I don't know if ultimately, Cignetti kept Slovis in because he believed Slovis was the best option last year. Start to finish. When Slovis was playing, he was playing because the offensive coordinator believed he was the best option. And you can like that or dislike it. You can agree with it. You can disagree with it. But it's the simple reality. It's just the truth. And so I think if Cignetti feels like Dracovic is the best option, he'll leave him in. If he thinks there's a better option, he'll pull him out. I don't know if he's going to necessarily be quicker or slower based on what happened last season. He's been around football for a long, long time. Probably too long to let one season completely change his perspective on how he approaches quarterbacks and quarterback management. But I think he'll do whatever he can to put the best option on the field. Let's see. General So's Chicken says, I saw ESPN has Pitt picked to finish 4th in the ACC next year behind Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina. Yeah, I didn't see that. That would be a nice... I think that would be a show of respect. Like, if it's a human poll and the humans vote for Pitt to be top 4 in the ACC, given all that they've lost, given all the holes that they have to fill, all the production that's gone, all the starters that they need, new starters that they need, and they still put them 4th, I think that's a testament to the respect they have for what Pat Narduzzi has built with this program. I really do. If that's where it ends up being, like I say, the ACC writers, if they end up putting Pitt 4th, I mean, that'll be, like I say, I think that'll be a testament to the program. Because I think there is a growing appreciation in the ACC, among people who watch the ACC and follow the ACC, a growing appreciation for what's been built at Pitt. And a lot of that stems from the last 2 years. A lot of it stems from Pitt, obviously winning the ACC 2 years ago. Kenny Pickett being a Heisman Trophy finalist. Jordan Addison winning the Biletnikoff Award. And then, fast forward to this year when they have an All-American in Kalijah Cansey and, they finished 5-0, after starting the season 4-4. They get a pretty respectable win against UCLA. I think around the conference, there's a fair amount of respect for this program, for this coaching staff, for this head coach, and for what he's built at Pitt. He's achieved a certain amount of longevity. He's one of the longest tenured coaches in the conference, and he's one of the most successful coaches currently in the conference. And I think there is respect for that. And so I wouldn't be surprised if when the preseason poll comes out, the media shows some love. And I think rightfully so, because it has been one of the better, more successful programs. So like I said, we don't always see it around here, or maybe we don't always perceive it all that well because we think about the games that got away, the Western Michigan and the Georgia Tech and the what have you. But I think that respect does exist, and probably rightfully so. Let's see. Hogmuncher says, if Clemson and or Florida State leave, Pitt needs to have a backup plan, even if it's just finding a better cultural fit, not necessarily a financial one. Are we talking about... Oh, yeah, two-part question. Have you heard anything on if Pitt could wind up in the Big 12 or Big 10 SEC? The greatest threat to Pitt athletics is being stuck in the ACC at this point. If Clemson and or Florida State leave, Pitt needs to have a backup plan, even if it's just finding a better cultural fit and not necessarily a financial one. So I'm of the mind, and I have been of the mind, and I'll continue to be of the mind until proven otherwise, that if Florida State and or Clemson had a way to get out of this conference, they would already be gone. A few months ago, Florida State started raising a stink about revenue and how they need more revenue, and it's just not sufficient. And I said at the time, and I continue to maintain, that that was taken as sort of a warning shot that Florida State is looking to leave the conference, and maybe it was. I'm more inclined to think that that was a sign that Florida State can't get out of the conference, and so they're trying to make waves to get unequal and uneven revenue distribution, which I wouldn't be surprised if that's what ultimately happens. But I think if Clemson had a way out of the ACC, if Florida State had a way out of the ACC, if North Carolina had a way out of the ACC, they would go. I really do. The fact that they haven't is a testament, I think, to the strength of the grant of rights, which is ultimately holding the conference together. And I know I've seen different math. Well, they could just do this. They could still make more money. If they went to the SEC, they could still make more money, even if they had to pay, the ACC all the grant of rights, media money, and all this stuff. Fine, great. They can make more money. If they can come out if they can come out in the black, then that's great. Then they should do it. But they haven't, right? They haven't done it. We've just had talk. And you don't talk about these things if you have a way of actually doing it. If they had a way to go, they wouldn't be talking about it and holding press conferences and all those kinds of things. They would just go. And they haven't. It just tells me that they can't get out. Now, Pitt having a backup plan, look, I think Pitt should be... If somebody calls and says, hey, Pitt, we want to talk about a potential plan for us to get together in the future, whether it's the SEC or the Big 10 or even the Big 12, I mean, you have to have those conversations. You have to answer the phone. You have to have those conversations. You have to talk about it. You might not want to leave the ACC, but you have to have some kind of contingency plan. You have to have some idea of what you're going to do if and when that time comes that this conference starts to get into real trouble, or even bigger trouble than it's in right now. You do have to have something. There's only so much you can do in terms of forming a contingency plan because you can't control whether the Big 10 wants you or whether the SEC wants you. The Big 12 would probably like to have you, and that wouldn't be a bad fit if they could get a better TV contract than they have. But, you never leave the phone ringing. You know what I mean? You never hit this little button on the side. If it's the SEC calling or the Big 10 calling or even the Big 12 calling, you don't hit that button and send it straight to voicemail. You answer, you talk, you have those conversations because you need to know what options are out there for you in case you need to pursue them. So, see what happens. See what happens. It's always interesting with conference realignment, and it'll probably continue to be for quite some time. I tell you what else is interesting. Wrapping up the live show for tonight. I appreciate everybody who joined the chat tonight. It's a lot of fun, as it always is. Having a little back and forth conversation for an hour. Just talk a little bit of Pitt sports live here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So do me a favor, hit that like button. Do me a favor, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Do all those things, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That make me real happy. And then go over to Panther-Lair.com. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. This is a website. You can get all your Pitt football, basketball, and recruiting news right there. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. All right. Thanks again for tuning in. We appreciate it. Got a new morning pit video coming to you tomorrow morning on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So you can look for that. And then we will, we'll have another one on Friday, and then another one on Monday, then Tuesday, then Wednesday, and we'll be back again for a live show next Wednesday night. And don't forget the Draft 412 draft party next Thursday night on the 27th at Stage AE. It's going to be awesome. Can't wait. Hope you can join us. But thanks for joining tonight. We appreciate it. Hope you have a great rest of the week. We'll talk to you on the morning pit, and then we'll see you next Wednesday night for the live Panther-Lair Show. Have a great week. Have a great weekend.